everybody. I came to work here in 1985 as secretary for the minister, and it was a fabulous experience. And I made a friend at that time. He was just a little 5 or 6-year-old kid in the Sunday school department, but he was a bright light, and we became very good friends. Well, many years later, I got married, and my wife had a son that was the same age as that little kid. Well, the son was going to have a sleepover that night, and when the door bell rang, I went to open it, and here was this little kid. And he looked at me like, what's the minister doing here? But because of that friendship, I was able to follow him throughout his childhood path and into his adult years. And actually, I went to Hawaii a couple years ago to marry him, which is a huge experience for me. Anyway, I was sitting in the chair today, and I see him walk through the door, he and his wife, but the family's expanded. They have a package with them, and I can't wait to see it. Tony, would you and your family come forward, please? They're visiting us from New Zealand, where Tony's been for maybe 10 or 15 years. Hi there. So turn around so we can see this little gem. And is there another one on the way? And next year we'll have 4, if you get what I mean. Tony, good to see you. Yeah, and you little doll, you're just precious. Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for coming today. My good friend Kent Robinson told me this story this week that I thought was really interesting. A woman was on her way to work, and she was running late, and as she approached an intersection, the light turned yellow. She thought if she could speed up, she'd make it through the intersection, but then she weighed on the side of safety and came to an abrupt halt. Well, the person behind her, and this guy in another car, also was running late for work, and he was wanting to get through the intersection before the light turned red, and when she stopped, he had to come to a stop, and he was furious. He rolled down his window. He started shouting obscenities at her. He stuck his hand out the window and flipped her off. Now, it just so happens that there was a police car right behind him that saw this whole thing. And he turned on his flashing red light, he got out of his car, he walked up, had the guy get out of his car, and he arrested him. Took him down to the station, put him in a holding cell for 2 hours. Well, when the guy finally got out, he was livid. He was going to sue the police department. And the arresting officer said, "I'm sorry, it was my mistake." He said, "When I pulled up behind you and saw the bumper stickers on your car, one is, 'I am a Christian.' Another was, 'What would Jesus do?' And the third was, 'Love others as I have loved you.' And when I saw that and I saw the way you were behaving, it was obvious that you had stolen the car." Where is Ken? Thanks. Well, this being Thanksgiving week, it is time for all of us to slow things down a little bit and just think about all the things in our life that bless us. We know that we have problems and challenges. That's just a part of life. But the good in our life always totally outweighs the difficult times in our lives. Every person in here has experienced setbacks, missteps, challenges, problems, upsets. That's just a part of life. That's the way it's always been, and it's never going to be any different, because life is a growing process, it's an evolving process, and whenever we move into new territory that we haven't experienced before, there are going to be mistakes and there are going to be problems. But every problem has a solution, and if it doesn't have a solution, then it's not a problem. This is the way it's been throughout human history. The human history path is one of problems, upsets, huge challenges, but our ancestors persevered to bring us to the place that we're at today. this type of lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that our problems have disappeared. Everybody in here still has problems and challenges. We all have those times when we just think that life isn't fair, or that God has forgotten us, or that we have done something wrong and that we are guilty for this mess that has occurred in our lives. But that's not the case at all. It's just a natural part of life. And keeping in mind that every problem has a solution, but that means getting outside of the problem instead of being immersed in it and looking at it from a different perspective. Currently, there are three issues I see in our society that don't seem to be getting the attention they need to come to a solution. And the first one is bullying. Now, bullying has been going on my entire life. I think I can remember back when I was in first or second grade and I got bullied on the playground. And it's never, ever been something to really discover what is the cause of that. It's always been reactive to slap their hands, put them in the corner, or do something. You punish the person that is bullying, but you don't determine what exactly is it that makes a bully bully. Now, there's a solution for that problem. There can be a point in time in human existence where bullying is extinct. It just doesn't exist. Another issue is mass killings. And when I was younger, there was no such thing as mass killings. I really didn't become aware of them until that fellow in Texas shot from the tower in maybe the 60s or so. But up until that time, there wasn't any such thing as mass killings, and now they seem to be a common part of our everyday life. So common that when something horrendous happens, like in Las Vegas, a week later, something else happens, and we forget Las Vegas, and now we're focused on the church in Texas. And then something else happens, and now we're focused on that. And we're reactive in that sense, too. Every time something like that happens, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Instead of being preemptive and coming to a solution that will end mass killings forever. Now, all mass killings, or most mass killings, are done with guns. There's no doubt about that. Let me put in a disclaimer here. This is not a political speech. And I am not here supporting anti-gun people. I'm not here supporting the NRA or gun owners. I'm just saying we have two different sides here that can't seem to come together and determine what is the solution to mass killings. Guns certainly play a part, but what is the answer? And both sides have to come together, and they have to sit down at the table with open minds and with the freedom to have a totally new perspective on solving the problem. We need to do it together. The biggest issue that we have in this country is when we come to tough situations, instead of coming together to figure out a solution, we end up fighting over who is right or fighting over who is going to win. And we get absolutely nowhere. Now, over the last couple of weeks, it has been interesting, the research they're doing on serial killers or mass killers, and they can come up with a psychological profile that all of them, I believe, or most of them, have been involved in some sort of violence, domestic violence in particular. And then they go a step further and take them back into childhood, and they can see commonalities that all these people had in their childhood. And it's a matter of putting more of our effort into that, more of our skills into that, and discovering the cause rather than reacting to the effects of what has taken place. It's the same with us in our lives. Every one of us have problems. And sometimes we have a tendency to overreact to them. We have a tendency to get sucked into the problem. We have a tendency to make the problem everything in our life. We're just immersed in it. Everything is dark. Everything is doom and gloom. If you look at your bulletin, I've put on here, many people have seen this before. I bring it out about once every year, but it has many different meanings. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, there is a black square. That black square represents a problem or a challenge that you might be facing today. But at the same time, all the other squares represent some blessing in your life, something good that is going on. But when we get immersed in the problem, we get sucked down into that black hole, and we cannot see anything else. And earlier I said the solution to every problem is getting outside of the problem and observing it with a different perspective than you have when you're inside the problem. Now, I got this idea from a person I sat next to at a wedding several years ago. At the reception, And she told me that she's a professor from the University of Texas. And I said, well, how's your life going? She says, my life is going just fine. She said, I just got over a 2-year bout of cancer, breast cancer. Well, tell me about that. She said, well, the day I was diagnosed, I went to the doctor and he told me, and he says, I was so sad and so upset that I cried for the rest of the day. She said, but I woke up the next morning and the sadness had disappeared, and I was angry. I was mad at God, I was mad at myself, I was mad at life, I was mad at everything. How could this happen to me? The next night, she was sitting at the table playing checkers with her partner. And all of a sudden, she took her arm and she swept all the checkers off the table. And she picked up a little deal of Post-it notes. And on the Post-it notes, she started writing her blessings, the things she liked. She loved her niece who was getting married. She put that in one square. She loved her partner, put that in another. She loved her job. She loved her students. She loved her car. She loved her garden. Everything that she loved that blessed her life filled up the squares until she got to the very last square, and she put cancer. She said, I decided in that moment that I was not going to dedicate any more time to cancer than I was going to dedicate to all the other blessings in my life. And as a result, I did spend maybe 10 minutes a day thinking about cancer, thinking about where it was going, thinking about myself overcoming it. But I spent the rest of my day thinking about all of the good things in my life. And she said, I thought about those things first. So by the time I got to cancer, I had a totally different mindset from being defeated or feeling victimized or things aren't fair to looking at it from outside the problem and realizing this is in my life and I have to deal with it and it's not going to take my life. She never missed a day of work at school, and she got her final examination just before the wedding, and the remission had continued for over 18 months, so she was very thrilled. But she said it wasn't the medical help that she owed her recovery to. She said it was the happiness she experienced every day that fortified her, that strengthened her, that gave her what she needed to continue on, even though she had this deadly disease eating away at her. Now, I present this to you because it's the same thing with us. When we have problems or challenges, and as I said before, it's very easy to get sucked into them where that's all there is. But there is a solution, and we've been wired to discover that solution. We've been wired with a genius where we can solve any problem that we are faced with as long as we take time to view it from a different perspective. Now, this is especially true in relationships. Anybody in here married with another person? Anyone here have a friend? You know, of course, we all do. We have relationships, and sometimes those relationships can get conflictive. You know, there's two different points of view, to put it mildly. And what happens is there's a problem, two different sides surface, and we begin to fight about whose fault the problem is or what the solution to the problem is. And two people get sucked into that black, dark void and start battling from opposite sides with opposite opinions. Now, that can go on forever, and sometimes we throw up our hands and say, I surrender, and we just go about our business. But nevertheless, that problem is still there, and eventually we get sucked back into it when something else triggers it. If you're in a relationship and you have conflict going on, know that there's a peaceful solution to that problem. And when the two of you step outside the problem and join hands and lock arms as a team, not opposed to each other, but as a team, that this is in our relationship, this is in our lives, let's you and me take this problem and solve it and get rid of it once and for all. Now, the only thing that can stop this process from working is if one of the two people in the relationship feels that he or she is always right, feels that he or she doesn't need to listen to what you have to say because what you have to say isn't important. The other person determines that it's going to be his way or the highway. And you're dealing with a person like that, the best solution that always works is to say goodbye. Tough to do, But you do not deserve to be in a relationship that abuses you. You do not deserve to be in a relationship that is demeaning or that suppresses your true creative expression. You deserve to have a nice, peaceful life. And when two people are committed to that, it will always take place. Another issue I'd like to talk about today, and that is what's been in the news as of late in regards to sexual harassment and sexual abuse. When I was a kid, it was happening everywhere. It was just a common fact of life. I grew up in my father's car dealership. I would see the salesmen flirting with the secretaries and doing things that weren't proper at all, but everybody kind of laughed about it, and including the secretaries, because there was this fear or this intimidation that if I reject the boss's favor, I am going to lose my job. And this has continued for my entire life. It's been everywhere. It's like it's been in the closet. It's happening everywhere, but everybody is afraid to address it. Until now, we've had a few brave people step forward and say, this is what took place, and it offended me, it hurt me, it changed my life. And when we hear those stories, it becomes apparent that once again, we have to gather around the table and figure out a solution for this thing. We cannot simply sweep it away and say, well, boys will be boys, or men will be men, or whatever it might be. We need to take a close look at it and determine what is the cause. What makes somebody think that they can offend another person, or that they can touch another person without permission, or that they can do something to another person, say something to another person that is off color and insulting. What makes them think that they can do that? They weren't born that way. Something caused that. And when we discover the cause, we discover the cure, and the cure is the solution. So once again, you might ask, what does this have to do with Thanksgiving? It doesn't sound to me like you're talking about anything that I can be grateful for, but you can, because the fact of the matter is what I'm talking about is facing life head on, and when problems come, we don't let them overrule us, we don't let them knock us down, we don't let them defeat us, but rather we know that we have the power within us, that we are wired with the genius to solve any problem that comes about and attempts to hamper our peace of mind and sense of well-being. That is what life is. So we can do away with a lot of the worry, a lot of the fear, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the despair, if we have that self-confidence within us that says, this is a problem, I'm going to solve it. And if I cannot solve it by myself, I'm going to find somebody that can help me solve it. If that person can't solve it, then we'll find a third person that can help us solve this problem. But we don't have to live with problems that degrade the quality of life that we experience. As we move into meditation, I ask you to take a few moments and think about maybe some of the rough spots in your life, and know with certainty, with unwavering confidence, that you have the power to move into that problem and to erase it from your life. Also, I want you to take time to think about the good in your life. You know, the problems are a small part, just as it shows in the front of the bulletin. Take time to think about all the good things that normally you don't take time to think about. And have that feeling, that emotional rush that comes from, I am blessed. We'll now move into meditation.